Well, now that it's quiet, let's start the meeting. Let's start the Henry County Special Meeting of October the 12th to order. Since it is a regular meeting and not a work session or a special meeting, we are going to stand for the pledge and have a prayer, please.
Thank you for the employees that are here. Thank you for their service. Please give us wisdom and help us to make good decisions. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. There are copies of the agenda on the podium, and I think I sent it out to department heads earlier this morning. The main topic today is we're going to go over and discuss monies that we have for employee raises for 2024. As it says on the agenda, audience, if you'd keep the questions to a minimum until the end and be called upon to speak, it'd be appreciated. Shannon, I'm going to turn it over to you because the next item involves a request to WIS, and I think we've been asked to go through Stephanie on that.
As soon as I looked at my thing, it's not holding down. Been through quite a bit, and I've spoken to some of the fellow council members regarding job classification, wages, differences, some groups' wages growing faster than others, what the root cause is to that, and I think that I have been able to identify a few root causes, and with council's permission, I would like to ask that Stephanie reach out to Wagner Irwin Sheely to get a summary price on what it will cost to review all of our job classifications, every one of them, all the job descriptions, and identify the ones that have tasks in them that could be special tasks that maybe shouldn't be included as part of it. The two root causes that I have found, in my opinion, are some groups' wages grow faster than others, and they're in the same job classification, which causes angst amongst the employees as well as the council, because we are not able to determine exactly how to handle that without looking at that and making a determination. The second root cause is we have job descriptions. As we heard from Wagner and Sheely during their visit with us, it's about the skill sets for the job, not about the tasks. The department head defines the task that they do. And it has been their experience that we have job descriptions with additional tasks brought in, thinking that that will be the key to increasing the wage for the job. That's not how they described that it worked, and I think that some of those additional tasks maybe should be considered as special tasks and eligible for special pay. And I would like to see us get all of our job classifications in order, look at the job descriptions, look at how they compare to market wages individually and possibly separately, not look at any specific individual. We're not talking about people here. We are talking about job descriptions and job classifications. This is the same end conclusion that I came to in 2015 when I was a citizen appointment on the job classification committee, that this needs to be done. I think it's been out of whack for a long time. It's gotten progressively worse, as these kind of things do. And I think a full review is in order. So with council's permission, I would like to ask Stephanie to describe that to Wagner Irwin Sheely and provide us with what it's going to cost, and we can decide if we want to spend that money at our next meeting.
You have my permission. I don't think it requires a vote to request that from our HR person.
I support that too. So we would, if we decide to go forward, have all the department heads rewrite their job descriptions and send it for review.
If they don't like the way they are now, they better.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my opinion. And we have some that we don't have job descriptions for, is my understanding. I don't know how we can properly provide job classifications or wage adjustments without having all that stuff straight. And that's where I think we are today. And I'd like to get us in a better place. Have Wagner and Winchili do that work, come in and present the findings to the entire job classification committee, and bring recommendations to the council for any adjustments that may be needed at that time.
Harold, any thoughts?
No, I think that'd be a good idea, because I'm sure that some of the jobs have possibly even done more work for that individual.
You are talking about getting an estimate, right? Because we moved their
Yes.
pay from 5,500 to 14,000.
And I would like to get that estimate. We can vote on that at our next meeting and get that work started as soon as they can possibly start.
Okay.
And with that estimate, Stephanie, I'd like to know what their time frame might be, how long they think it'll take to do that. So,
I think you have permission.
thank you. Thank you, Stephanie.
One of the things I wanted to talk about is we asked Baker Tilly to give us an update on what they call I call it a balance sheet, but it's a summary of our 2024 budget as we left it at the end of August after our budget hearings. And just to make sure that we could afford what we were proposing to do within the budget. And I shared that with the council. I think Debbie got a copy. Hopefully, all the council members got a copy. I gave a summary of my thoughts last Sunday, was it? I think.
Yes,
Yeah, it was
3:41 p.m.
Watching the Colts game, or the end of the Colts game, I sent that on. Here are some of my observations from reading this 19-page summary. The general fund looks pretty healthy. I'd estimated during our work session, it looked like we're going to have a 30% balance or more. They concurred that we would have. That's column F on page 19. We're going to be almost balanced out and use up the entire cumulative bridge fund. I've mentioned that numerous times in the last 3 years. It's among the lowest in East Central Indiana. If we adjust it up, it will affect the general fund and others. So it is going to be in the black, but barely in the black. I think we stopped the bleeding in the cumulative capital development. The CCD fund, it was heading deep in the red, and we made some adjustments, and it's going to end up about 6% in the black. They recommend at least a 15% balance in these funds, but it would have been about 15% in the red if we hadn't made the adjustments we did in August. Our public safety lid is accumulating a decent balance, but we also know the demands for that's going to be very high. The volunteer fire departments have all requested monies from that, given recent legislation. We know also it shows that there's going to be a really big balance in the park fund, but we know that their salary requests were not in what we had at budget hearing time, so that's going to go back down to quite a bit to a reasonable level instead of having that big of a balance when they actually are funded for salaries. Statewide 911, it shows a 50% deficit, but we know with the new PSAP that Baker Tilly tells us is going to be receiving revenues in January. We hope that's true. That should be balanced out. Jail lid is continuing to build a steady balance. When we built the jail, we didn't know exactly what the bids would come in. So we're accumulating a little bit of extra money. We thought that the legislation said we could tap 30% for operating costs, and right now it stands at 20%, which is better than the 0.2% that got written into law. They realized that was an error at the state level, and they're correcting that. So We're back to 20% as of today, but that's building because, well, we need to consider things like a jail pod and with that is building and other considerations similar to that relating to safety. Page 20. Yeah, I said 19 pages. It's actually a 20 page because on page 20, if we can keep the general fund balance between 5 and 6 million, that is what is recommended. At a conference from AIC last month, they said you need to have a reserve of 6 months of running operational costs. That's all funds, including the general. We're right at that in general. And if we make the correction because of the PSAP and the 911, we should have about 6 million, which is 6 months in general, and probably 14 million in all other funds, selected funds that they do. And that averages out about 6 months. So we are where numerous financial advisors are telling us we need to be. And they tell all counties the same thing. Greg Gutierrez was the other person that spoke with Jason Similar on best budget practices at AIC. And they both reiterated it's not so much the percentage, it's that you need 6 months of operating balance in case something goes really south in a hurry. And we finally, over 5 years, have built that up. Our self-insurance was also bleeding badly. Susan, you remember that. In January 2029, it was $780,000 in the red. We, I think, put a tourniquet on that, and we've been in decent shape since. It's held steady with the last 5 years, even though it has increased according to inflation. We added 5% as per recommended by Josh Estel, and that should keep it pretty steady in the red. It all takes about 3 or 4 really large claims that can dig into that or eat into that very quickly. Last 2 years, we gave a 50-cent an hour increase each of the last 2 years for part-time. My notes show that costs about $20,000 a year. I'm not suggesting we do that again. I'm just saying, like in a lot of areas, we weren't competitive. They were very low. Some were less than $10 an hour. We assisted somewhat each of the last 2 years. And again, I'm not necessarily recommending we do that this year. I'd like to see us put what monies we have into full-time. We do have enough monies in the balance, according to what is on this report, to increase longevity from $200 to $300, which would max out after 15 years at $1,500 instead of the current $1,000. Which gives a little boost for incentive for those who put in the most time. That would cost us $41,000 next year. In lieu of giving road deputies a larger raise than all the others that were in the county, it's been suggested we do have the monies to afford between a $2,000 and a $2,500 matrix for sheriff's deputies. Overall, we've monies to, and I think this has been calculated and recalculated, we have monies for a 5% raise for all full-time employees, except for the council and probation. Probation is getting approximately an 8% raise that's dictated by the state of Indiana. They're state employees that we have to pay for. So they are under state law. They are state employees. It is up to the council to pay what the state says we must pay. Very similar to sheriff and some others. Because we are building up monies in the safety lid and the jail lid, we probably need to work in 2024 with Baker Tilly and figure out how best to tweak those. Comments, questions?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment on the public safety lid. If you refer to the document that was given to us I'm gonna find the page, hold on.
Probably 13 or 15.
It is, yes, the balance, which was not much in the public safety lit, does continue to grow, but the amount that it continues to grow based on the changes that we have done with budgeting shrinks.
Right. What page is that?
That is on page
Page number
4.
switched.
It's page 4,
Yeah, the page number switched between the one we got in August and the one we got last week.
right? And it had gone, actually, we had dipped into what that balance was by $65,000 back in 2021. So we showed a negative amount of, we had spent, every bit of that was coming in plus $65,000 in 2021. In 2022, we didn't spend $47,000 of it. And in 2023, if we finish out the year as projected, is what I'm looking at here, we'll have $429,000. That amount in 2024 drops to 120, then to 116, then to 78, based on our projected budget.
Sure, I'm looking at the same.
Those numbers are right there. Increase or decrease in the amount of cash.
Okay.
My point is, we made changes in the budget to try to appropriately use the
Right.
jail lit and the public safety lit to accommodate what could be paid out of those lit
Right.
funds.
And I'm-
And we've done that.
I agree. We still have, I'm looking at the bottom line, the operating balance percentage, we're still hovering over 60%.
Completely
we-
agree.
And last year, we got supplemental lit, which I understand we cannot count on.
Correct.
Of 141,000, so we're in good shape. It's taken 5 years of sharpening our pencils, but finally, I think we're in good shape and can give raises that are deserving of our employees, which we've not been able to do safely until this year. We would be digging into reserves slightly, but every year we've done a balanced budget. The next year, it's gone up from 0% in 2019, Susan, to 7%. 15%, 20%, 20%, 29%, and even with the changes in what we're proposing to give, it's up to 32%. I'm looking at page 3, which gives us the 6 months that is recommended. So even with a 5% salary increase, and it'd be about 8% for probation because that's set by law, Indiana. We do have monies for a good matrix for the sheriff's department. They have a fairly young, especially road deputies, a young staff that requires a lot of training. I do think that our veteran employees need a better bump in longevity, because I don't think 200 is much of an incentive to stick around for long periods of time. Also, it caps at 1,000, and I think 1,500 is much more enticing with inflation than what 1,000 is. And the fact that it only costs 41,000, I think we figured that the matrix next year for sheriff would cost us 21,000, is that? I think that's what I had down. Which is about what it cost us to give a 50% per hour increase each of the last 2 years. And I'm not recommending that, but it's up for consideration. That's up to the council to discuss. But I'm just saying, we have checked and double-checked, and we have monies to give a 5% raise for everybody but council, and we have to do what we have to do with probation. And that's keeping the longevity with the probation that we added last year. Again, they are state employees, and I have been told more than once they do not have to operate under our personnel manual. But that is something and it's still not corrected in the personnel manual, but that's another issue because you're going to,
Can we talk about the details of the sheriff's matrix? So
Yeah.
2,500
Pull your,
every,
Or your mic
you need
on.
your mic on, yeah. Pull it down to you, or maybe you can't. It's not on.
green light.
Oh, you got a red light, there you go.
There you go.
okay. Okay, I'll try one more time.
Okay,
So 2,500 every 5 years, is that what we're saying?
starting at year 5.
Starting in year 5, and where does it max at?
Max is at 15,000.
Max is at 15. That's what we're suggesting. Okay, just wanted to clarify. And so we're suggesting 300 for longevity, which maxes at 1,500.
It maxes at $1,500.
Okay.
And again, if we'd gone up just $50, that would cost $20,500. If we'd gone up to $300, it's right at $41,000. All the things, if we were to add the part-time, it'd be about between part-time, longevity, and sheriff matrix next year would be close to $100,000.
Have we discussed part-time at all? And should we do that now?
No, it's an option. We gave a boost of 50 cents an hour to part-time in 2021 and 2022 and 2023. It costs approximately $20,000.
What is our current rate that we set last year? 12?
It varies. It rates.
Oh, okay.
2 years ago, there were some making less than $10 an hour. By department,
set a
it
minimum.
averages between 11 and 15 for the most part.
Okay,
But closer
Did we
to
not
12.
set
12 is probably a good average.
okay. I thought we set a minimum.
We did, and I don't remember what
I
it
don't
was.
either.
Debbie? Debbie?
Do you
What
remember?
did we set last year? Go ahead.
Do you remember what the minimum part-time wage we set last year was?
$12.50.
$12.50.
We talked about $12.50, 13, and I think 12, and we set on the medium at $12.50.
Okay. So are we talking about setting a $13 minimum or just offering department heads an option of giving all their part-time
I think all
employees
along
a 50?
we've given department heads the option. Most
Right.
of them, majority of them took that, and a couple of them said, don't need to.
Right,
And they didn't. We gave the department heads an option on whether to
Okay.
actually implement that $12.50 minimum for part-time. If we did part-time matrix and longevity and a 5% raise for everyone, I feel like that would pretty much max out our safety net that we've been building the last 4.5, 5 years. And then next year, we'll have to take a very close look. But every year we've done a balanced budget, we've added about 5 to, except for 21, 22, we've added about 5 to 7% in our cash balance at the end of the year. And that's why we're able to offer what we are. Last year, we only gave a 2.9%, and I think double that for sheriff deputies. And that's when inflation was at 9%, and that didn't feel good. And I know it didn't feel good to the employees, but it also built our cash balance from the general fund from 20% to 30%, so we could have given them more. I think it's time to make up for the fact that we've been frugal and fiscally conservative. I think it's time to give back. And I feel safe that we have the monies to do so because we've been frugal and conservative with the monies, but enough is enough. This has been the first time in over a decade we've got the ability to give them closer to inflation rate and what they're worth. They're worth more than this. Makes us more competitive.
Do you have any thoughts on part-time rate?
I think setting a floor is almost not, I mean, I'm not opposed to adding that 50 cents an hour as the minimum at all. I think those part-time employees are just as important to the county to get done the work that needs to get done as full-time employees. I guess I don't want to, the full-time employees have their jobs and everybody's, I guess what I'm trying to say is we're a well-oiled machine that works well together, right, sometimes. And those part-time employees have to be part of that and get their job done too. So if increasing that to $13 an hour is essential in helping the county function, then I am completely in favor of it.
It almost brings about to starting wages at most of our fast food restaurants, to be honest with you. And there's no benefits that go along with that, so
Okay. So are we making motions and passing matrix and longevity now, or are we going to wait till the end?
we can approve that, but it's not official until, because either department heads, and Debbie may have to educate us, we're going to have to go back and calculate longevity. And I don't know if that's something Stephanie does, auditors do, department heads do. A lot of work for us happens behind the scenes. And they would have 2 weeks to do so, but I did go through, Stephanie gave me the numbers, and it would cost right at $41,000 to increase from 200 to 300. And that boosts on year 3, and every 3 years it takes a $300 boost, and again, it tops out at $1,500 after 15 years. But again, I think that's the least we can do, because I think we don't do enough currently to reward our veterans who've put in the time over the years. I mean, there's other things they get, like accumulated sick pay, but
I think we need to look at things maybe in 3 different pieces. We can have a motion on the part-time. I think that's fine. I think we need to have a motion on raises, and then we need to probably have a motion on longevity and matrix. We can either do those together or separately. Either way, we're going to ask the auditor's office to, and all the department heads, I assume, you can tell us if we're wrong, to draft up the salary ordinances, right? That's what we're here to do, because if we're going to pass salary ordinances, we need to do that at our October 26th meeting.
2 weeks from today.
Is that, I know, please go ahead.
After talking to the state and stuff, we don't have to have amended salary ordinances, because it would be raises, so we can write those down.
Good.
Okay.
We would have to have an amended longevity, though,
Right.
from the department head.
Okay.
Because that would be pretty hard for us to go back through and figure. Yeah, that would be, the longevity is what we would need. The
Okay.
salaries we would with the longevity, yes.
So fortunately, that's usually only 3 or 4 per medium to large-sized department that would get a bump, like in year 3 or starting in year 5 for matrix. So there would have to be some calculations, but it's not like for every employee that would hit that mark next year. Right? I mean, every 3 years for the non-matrix people, it gets longevity. So it's not like every one of them's going to hit it next year.
3 to 5, and then 6 to 8.
Right. It's every 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the average, a third of the employees would need to look at the longevity and change that.
So if the floor is open for a motion, if we take them one at a time as we talk about them, is
Yeah, I
that
think we
okay?
can do the whatever percentage raise, we can do that, and the others separately, like Shannon said.
Okay, so I would make a motion that we raise part-time pay by 50 cents an hour.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that moves at 1250 to 13
Yeah.
floor, okay, for part-time. Next,
I'd like to address the matrix and longevity.
okay,
Stephanie graciously reached out and got lots of information related to longevity, and I did some work on my own, getting some information, looked at matrix wages comparison. I will tell you that I believe the law enforcement agencies in Indiana, including the Sheriff's Association, has done a great job of spreading what they would like to have from a matrix standpoint to all of the counties which explains why it's difficult for longer tenured officers to stay here when they see this other matrix being implemented elsewhere around the county. Unfortunately, what we saw from longevity, what I got from longevity, including what Stephanie provided, longevity is all over the place. It's everywhere. And there's no consistency to it. There's some, you can kind of look through it and get some. But I think sticking with what we have for now and maybe discussing that with Wagner and Shealy would be feasible. I'm saying sticking with the structure, not necessarily the dollar amount. I'm not opposed at all to increasing the dollar amount. So with that, I would move that we increase the sheriff's matrix pay for merit officers to the $2,500 every 5 years and increase the longevity to $300. Matrix pay would top out at $15,000. Longevity pay would top out at $1,500. That's my motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved. Did you second it?
I did.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for increasing the current longevity for applicable employees from $200 to $300, maxing out at $1,500. It's been moved and seconded that we move the matrix to $2,500 that maxes out at $15,000 after how many years?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
Where's the top out, Josh? 30?
30.
Okay, so twice the number of years to get there than what it does for the longevity employees. Any discussion?
I need you to clarify, go back to longevity.
We're just changing,
Saying from 2 to 300, but I don't, if you're,
it's per year, the $200
year.
to $300
Instead of
per
bumping
year.
up 200, it bumps up 300 at every third year. Yes.
Yes.
And then that would max out at 1,500 instead of 1,000 as it does now.
And again, I think that needs to be reviewed with Wagner and Shealy at some
Okay.
point.
Well, you people on the job classification, you just review away. I'm not on it. Discussion on longevity in the matrix? If not, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes 4-0. The other thing that I have, thank you for your work. I know a lot of hours have been put into this since late June. I mentioned our insurance is healthy. At the work session we had, I talked to Corey Murphy at the groundbreaking of the expansion of the Basketball Hall of Fame. He was the vice president of Food and Beverage Committee. He knows that that's going to be a reboot. There's only about $1 million instead of $5 million because it's only been a few years since we tapped that. So it doesn't have to go through the 5-month-long advertising. We already have 4 requests for monies out of it. I talked to Joel, and he advised, and his advice I sent on to Corey, and I've also communicated with Landon, who was the president. Those are 4-year terms. Anyway, the people that were on it are still on it for another several years.
I have a question. When did we decide we had $1 million to give away?
Rough calculations I've been doing from looking at the report that Debbie gives us every month before our meeting.
I think we should vote on that as a council.
Vote on what?
The amount we have to give away, like
Okay, let's do that at our next
that okay?
meeting. We get an exact number. That
yeah,
is,
I think that's a good idea.
that's fine. We'll get an exact number and we can do that. But it's at least $1 million. So I round to the nearest 150 probably in most cases. But I felt comfortable in saying we have about $1 million versus the 5 we had after building it up for 5 years. So,
Mr. President,
Yes,
we still haven't addressed a general raise.
we haven't. Is that important?
I think everybody would like to know that.
Okay. Well, who would like to make that motion?
I will. I'll move that we provide a 5% across the board raise for all employees except county council and probation.
Okay, and probation is set by the state. And so you made a motion and Harold seconded. Any discussion?
I have a point of discussion.
Yes.
So I told the sheriff that I would mention during the meeting. He did ask us to consider a raise amount that would raise starting deputies to the 50,000 mark, so it'd be easier to hire. And I told him I would mention that during the meeting, during discussion, since we
Okay.
weren't allowing others to speak.
If you'd come up to the mic, please, because we are live streaming, Sheriff.
Yes, you specifically asked every county employee to, I'm sorry, I was reading, but the sheriff asked that every county employee would get a 5.8%
I got the same
raise.
text.
Yes, I wanted to make sure that that was for every
sorry.
county
Right.
across the board.
And the reason I didn't bring it up is we don't quite have enough monies to do that comfortably and do what we're advised, so
That's okay. And did she explain what it was?
I
The reason I
just-
said that?
Because it would be easier to hire if you had a 5 starting your salary, yeah. And we get that.
For everybody, not just us.
Thank you,
duly
Sheriff.
noted. And I got the same text, and that's exactly what it said. And I wish we had, we're digging into reserves, and I just don't know.
Well-
And I wasn't anticipating, this is still discussion, right? I'm not,
No, I get it, yeah.
Roberts is not rolling over his grave. I wasn't expecting the 50-cent part-time raise, so we kind of went over already. We're
If-
gonna dig a little bit into reserves, but that's okay because we've been building it up for 5 years. Go ahead,
It
I'm
ver-
done.
No,
speaking.
it very well could. And we cut $415,000 out of the jail lit. In our last work session, we discussed where that comes from. And I suggested that we needed to pay that out of reserves instead of tapping into the dollars that we put in reclassification for wages. And that wasn't a motion, it was just a discussion as part of our work session. But that work session happened before we got this Baker Tilly report.
That's true.
And there's more revenue projected in that Baker Tilly report than what we had in the previous one. We could pay for that $415,000 with the basic revenue projections out of Baker Tilly, still have our money for wages, wage increases, as well as the matrix pay and the 50 cents an hour, and very little tap into our reserves, if at all. And I think the Wagner-Irwin-Shealy study that I'm asking to have done will come back and tell us that we could make additional changes mid-year that we're going to need to address. That is what I think, and I appreciate the sheriff's comments, and I also appreciate that 5.8% gets you to where you would like to be, and you would like to see that for the entire county. That's very appreciated. I personally think we're going to need to get there mid-year. 5.8 would be great. I can't see that we have the revenue right now to do that with the other changes that we've got coming. We need to understand if we can pay for some of those expenses out of the jail lit.
I agree. I am in favor of the 5%, and as Shannon said, more targeted discussion about specific job positions will be continuing.
Just press your right button, right one. Yeah.
Shannon called me this morning, talked with me a little bit, since I was on the sheriff's department and sheriff. And I care about all the employees. Now, please don't get me wrong. I know that they have went through a grind. It's never enough money, and the consideration and how dangerous your jobs are. And I understand that personally. But I know this guy has worked hard for you fellas. He called a lot of departments. He talked with the sheriffs and deputies. He put a lot into this, and I think no money's enough, I know, but this guy has put a lot into it, and Susan helps a lot. And I realize you need more, but with what's available, I think they treated you pretty decent this year. You can always use more, I know that. But I personally want you to know that as a former enforcement officer. Nobody's lying, everybody's telling the truth. So, best to you.
Thank you. We have any other discussion? We have a motion for a 5% raise for everyone, 0 for the county council, and what the state mandates for the probation officers. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you for your work. As Harold pointed out, a lot of work has gone in this year to try to do the best we can with the revenues available. Now, since I digressed on food and beverage, there are going to be lots of additional appropriations coming up in the next 2 months, more than we've had. We did not know about the juvenile housing since the YOC closed to us. Our legal expenses have gone up. That's going to be additional. We've paid everything out of reclassification. We're paid everything out of our sick pay when individuals retire. I talked to Stephanie. There are numerous people in the pipeline that could retire. We've increased insurance. We've increased the housing. We've increased the sick pay payout with anticipation, and we just never know if it's going to be enough. You, Susan, Shannon, and Kyle are on the Personnel Manual Review Committee, along with all 3 commissioners. I'd like to see that start as soon as possible to get the longevity, at least what we talked about, because it's still not updated with the longevity being put back in for the probation officers. But that's up to you, because I've stepping down from being on that. We may have some changes. Is Butch here? Yeah, Butch is here. Has a decision been made about your replacement? You have a board? No, not yet. Okay, so it's coming. So there's going to be some changes there. There's potential changes in the highway department. That's in the commissioner's ballpark. I already mentioned the park salaries were not in the budget request. We know that. Money's been put back to allow for that. We did some modifications because some departments were paying that are not from general fund that have their own tax rate are paying twice as much as other departments per employee for insurance. We modified that to make it far more equitable. So that each department's paying pretty much the same per employee for the self-insured through their own tax rate and their own budgets. There was discussion, I'm not going to bring this up too much. I talked to Joel last night. There was talk about the sheriff cars and the commissioners meeting yesterday. I know some of you listened in, I listened in. Possibly, you've been working hard with, I know Matt Pierce and others. There's possibly, we budgeted $64,000. There was some discussion yesterday that would take 67 to do something. I was listening to Steve Dellinger. There's a possibility that they may come back and ask for more, but that's within our budget allowances to be able to do that. If that's a decision that's made, it might have to go from, and that's not been decided yet. That's just an option out on the table. So I don't think that would be a problem if that's an option that is tapped. As far as going from 64,000 to 67, I think it was. So I'm just mentioning things that may be coming down the pike. Implicit bias is next Wednesday. There's a couple of county employees that are getting that training that I think sponsored by EDC, Schaefer Leadership, and that's at the Smith Building. I've signed up, I think, for the afternoon session. There's a morning session from 9 to 11. And an afternoon session from 1 to 3. I took that several years ago. I'd recommend it. And I know Stephanie's been bringing in, or McGowan's been bringing in training that I've seen some of you in here. There was one on sexual harassment, one on EEOC and other matters this past week. It's for department heads. I've been trying to come to those. I would recommend them if you can attend them. They're interesting. I've got the handouts And I think we have a copy machine somewhere in the county that I can make copies if you'd like them. So what else, council? Those are the notes I have. What else?
I think got plenty for today.
Anybody in the public would like to comment? We do appreciate the work you do. I'm glad we're able to halfway show that this year. And hopefully, if we continue to watch the dollars and get good advice from our financial advisors, hopefully we can continue to give you closer to the inflation rate and more competitive with other counties. It is really hard to compete with the donut counties. They're growing like crazy. They're getting revenues like crazy. And the state, in their infinite wisdom, in the election year coming up next year, capped our revenues at 4%. I mean, our assessed value has gone up about 8%. If you ask the real estate agents, they said we can't collect more than 4% in the next 2 years. So they're appealing to the taxpayers and the voters. So we're capped at the revenues of what the state tells us, but we're glad to be able to do the 5% because you deserve that and more. So we appreciate every one of you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Thank you all. Adjourned till next Thursday at 4. We seem to have a different time.
2 weeks, the 26th.
Oh, 26, pardon me. Yeah, you need 2 weeks to do that longevity stuff. My mind is mush.